بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Last time we stopped by uh, verse number 26. Inshallah, we'll continue from there. Actually, 25. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما أرسلنا من قبلك من رسول إلا نوحي إليه أنه لا إله إلا أنا فاعبدون. وقالوا اتخذ الرحمن ولدا سبحانه بل عباد مكرمون لا يسبقونه بالقول وهم بأمره يعملون. يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يشفعون إلا لمن ارتضى وهم من خشيته مشفقون. ومن يقل منهم إني إله من دونه فذلك نجزيه جهنم كذلك نجزي الظالمين. أولم يرى الذين كفروا أن السماوات والأرض كانتا رتقا ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي أفلا يؤمنون. وجعلنا في الأرض رواسي أن تميد بهم وجعلنا فيها فجاجا سبلا لعلهم يهتدون. وجعلنا السماء سقفا محفوظا وهم عن آياتها معرضون. وهو الذي خلق الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر كل في فلك يسبحون. صدق الله العظيم. There is not a single messenger that we've sent before except that we've revealed to them that there is no God but Allah, that is, there is no God but I, fa'budun. So dedicate yourselves to me. وَقَالُوا اتَّخَذَ الرَّحْمَنُ وَلَدًا. And yet some of them claim that the Lord of mercy has taken a son. Subhanahu, he is far above this. بل عباد, far above what they claim. بل عباد مكرمون. Indeed, what he has is nothing but an honorable servant. لا يسبقونه بالقول. They never speak ahead of him. وهم بأمره يعملون. In fact, they act only on his command. يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم. He knows what is ahead of them, what is behind them. ولا يشفعون إلا لمن ارتضى. And they have no capacity to help anyone but with his permission. وهم من خشيته مشفقون. And they stand in awe and in reverence of him. ومن يقول منهم إني إله من دونه فذلك نجزيه جهنم. If any of them, we'll come to this later. If any of them were to say that I am a God besides Allah, then we will condemn or will assign them to hell. This is the way we repay, this is the way we condemn the evildoers or the wrongdoers. أولم ير الذين كفروا أن السماوات والأرض كانتا رتقا ففتقناهما. Those people who deny the truth, have they not considered that the heavens and the earth at some point were one piece, one mass, if you wish. فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا, but we separated them. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ, and it is out of water that we've produced or introduced every living thing. Will they still not believe? وَجَعَلْنَا فِي الْأَرْضِ رَوَاسِيَ أَن تَمِيدَ بِهِمْ, and we placed on the earth mountains to stabilize the earth, so that it doesn't become shaky and sway with them. وَجَعَلْنَا فِيهَا فِجَاجًا سُبُلًا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ, and we made pathways or passages in it, so that they may find their ways in it. And we made the skies, we made the heaven like a protected ceiling, a protected canopy, if you wish. وَهُمْ عَنْ آيَاتِهَا مُعْرِضُونَ, and yet they turn away from all these signs. وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. It is Him who created the day and the night, the sun and the moon. Everything runs smoothly and consistently in its orbit. Inshallah, we pause here. As usual, inshallah, we begin by 2 or 1 minute of silent reflection with one question in mind. Pick one single word, or one single sentence, or one single verse that captured your attention. Perhaps we should begin with Hafiz. Sure. Let's pick one first and then we'll come back to it. لا يسبقونه بالقول. And the second one? Which is? Okay. Great. Mustafa. Okay. Interesting. Ahmed. Hamid, do you wanna add? Okay. No worries. Ahmed, you did. Okay, yeah, sure. Which one? Oh, wow. Abdullah. Excuse me. Would you mind leaving some space here for the sisters? Thank you so much. Abdullah. في فلك يسبحون. نعم. عليكم السلام. 28. Yeah. ولا يشفعون إلا لمن ارتضى. Okay. عبد الوهاب. كيسان. No worries. Zayan. 25. Okay. Ali. The same one. Okay. Arnie? Any thoughts? Okay. Ibrahim? Do you have any thoughts? Nothing? Okay. Okay. It's Probably لعلهم يهتدون, perhaps. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. Okay, maybe we begin with حافظ لا يسبقونه بالقول. Okay, okay. So, what are you asking? What is in it for me? Okay, okay. So, like you said, يحافظ لا يسبقونه بالقول. This is a discussion of the angels. Allah is telling us, what's wrong? لا يسبقونه بالقول. Allah is describing the angels. لا يسبقونه بالقول. They don't speak ahead of Allah. In other words, they know the limits. They don't do anything without His permission. What is in this for us is that we get to know our limits with Allah, that we don't put ourselves before Allah, uh, uh, that we don't put ourselves ahead of Him. If you may think of لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله, don't put anything before Allah and His Messenger. So that could be a lesson that we draw from this. You could draw a professional lesson for us in our lives in general as well. How we may relate with the people that are of authority, perhaps, of I don't know, superiority or whatever. That we don't really, literally that's what the verse that I just cited. لا تقدموا بين يدي الله. Don't, for example, imagine sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He wouldn't speak before he speaks. You wouldn't interrupt him. Think of a teacher. Think of someone that provides guidance. Blah blah blah. That is something that you can draw from this. If that makes sense. لا يسبقونه بالقول وهم بأمره يعملون. الله أعلم. Oh, definitely, 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 absolutely, absolutely. But of course, the qawl, as we always say, get the literal meaning first and then expand on it. Yani, initially, yes, they don't speak before he speaks. They don't speak before him. But what does that indicate as well? It indicates that they abide by his laws. They go after he goes. Blah blah blah. Uh, Beautiful, beautiful, definitely, definitely. That's a good reading into it, and it definitely takes it absolutely. لا يسبقونه بالقول. And this passage is so dense because of that. You can read so much in it, so much of relevance in it. That could also mean, I wait until he you know he explains things to me if you wish. I'm not quick to judge Allah, for what He does to me, blah blah blah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's the principle and all that reads into it, definitely. Yeah, yeah. The reference is to the angels. Now, okay? To give some context, they claim the verse before this one says, وَقَالُوا اتَّخَذَ الرَّحْمَنُ وَلَدًا. They claim that Allah has children. That is the deniers, that is the disbelievers. They claim that that was a common, by the way, when the Quran speaks when it speaks of a people that ascribes children to Allah, we often think of Christians. The Quran, most of the time, when it speaks of this, it actually speaks of the people of Mecca, because this was a very common belief in Mecca, calling the angels the daughters of God. So, وَقَالُوا اتَّخَذَ الرَّحْمَنُ وَلَدًا, they claim that Allah had taken children. And the Quran responds by saying Allah is far above this, because to have kids, that indicates a need, and Allah is beyond any need. بَلْ عِبَادٌ مُكْرَمٌ, Allah says actually what He has is just servants. These are His servants. لَا يَسْبِقُونَهُ, these angels, they don't do anything before Him. They wait until He permits and He gives them permission to do things. So they don't put themselves before Allah. Yes, Yatin. Yeah, that's true. But within this context, the discussion is on the disbelievers of Mecca. But these are different surahs that talk about the Christians. But this particular surah, that is chapter 21, is to do with the disbelievers of Mecca. And of course, the discussion on Christians is a different surah, though. Abdullah. Is that your point? Okay, please. I didn't get the point. Apologies. How is? Hmm. Yeah, sure. But that's based on a different versions of the Quran, not this particular one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Okay, Subhan. Sure. The Quran often uses those expressions to signify you know, how blasphemous, how dangerous the previous statement is. It just means Allah is different, far above what they claim. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, sir. As in, we ourselves, there are various reasons for us to want to have kids. Like, when you get married, why would you get married? Why would you want to have kids when you get married? Isn't that a need? Here you go. Allah does not need. He could fulfill whatever He wants with no means, if you wish. Yeah. How do we come back to your point on the علماء الذين كفروا after we circulate? Mustafa? Brilliant. So the first point is to do with. Oh, okay, brilliant. أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. That's a very important point. It is important when we sometimes we jump to conclusions. As in, what does the Quran have to say on this, on the creation of the world? But equally important is how the Quran makes the argument. So not just the conclusion or the theology, what we identify as theology. What does the Quran want me to believe? Right? The Quran wants me to believe that, the heavens and the earth were merged, were one piece. But he separated them. That's the conclusion. That's the theology, right? But equally, if not more importantly, to be honest, is what we call today methodology. How does the Quran make this argument? How does the Quran want me to arrive at this? It says, look, observe. Don't they observe? Observation is literally step number one in the scientific method, that you pause to observe. In numerous places in the Quran says, Undur, Unduru, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَلَمْ تَرَ, blah, blah, blah. Hundreds of places in the Quran. So, thank you for paying attention to this, Ya Mustafa. How does the Quran make this argument? Now, Allah could have said, believe in this, believe that the heavens and the earth were one. He doesn't say that. He wants you to arrive at this conclusion on your own. أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. That's the methodology. Sometimes we are just quick to really see the conclusion. Allah says, I want you to think for yourselves. Look, observe, investigate. That's very important. So that we don't become an ummah of imitation. We just imitate and copy whatever is being said. Allah wants us to participate in arriving at these truths. And this is a Quranic methodology. Like, it's consistent throughout the Quran. Just if you read every single surah, you will find this. أَوَلَمْ يَنْظُرُوا أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَلَمْ تَرَى أَلَمْ يَرَوْا, in numerous places. That means this is a Quranic methodology. Observation is a Quranic methodology. The second point, Mustafa, can we come back to it after, perhaps? Ahmad? Yeah, sure. Hmm. It's not observable. It's not observable now. You never know what happens in the future. But the fact that we don't really have access to the ends of the world is a little bit so indicative of how expansive it is. And like today, these words are being said to a people who had no means whatsoever to really investigate the world in terms of the ends of the world, blah blah blah. Today we have much more advanced means, so our knowledge of the world has advanced. Perhaps the people that will come after us will have even deeper and more extensive tools. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of science, some of them are obvious, but this one, أو نرى أن السماوات والأرض كانتا رتقا وهما جعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي. Actually, now we know that our bodies are sending us a living creatures are so it's like giving science back then, and to put this in the future.
Absolutely. 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 Yeah. That's a very good point, by the way. Like again, much of, especially the verse that, mashallah, captured everyone's attention. أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, verse number 30. It is very deep. It's become particularly famous in the last 30, 40 years with the rise of the scientific interpretation of the Quran, whether the Quran has scientific miracles or not. It's good that people start to look into the Quran again and see for themselves. The Quran has been saying this for ages. I mean, I'm astonished that we only started to look into this now, and but that speaks of us as well. As in, why do we ask these questions? And why do we claim that the Quran has miracles today? Right? Why haven't we claimed this, I don't know, 4 or 5 centuries ago? Mainly because, there is the framework, the scientific framework. We work within our scientific frameworks. In the Muslim world, which has been dwindling for a long time, in terms of scientific advancement. We had a very limited framework in terms of science. So we could barely, uncover the secrets of the Quran. When some other people arrive at expand this framework, our framework as human beings. So our imagination of what science is, our imagination of the whole world, we start to really be alerted to what is happening in the Quran. So that speaks. People ask like, okay, can we introduce different interpretations of the Quran? Blah blah blah. The Quran speaks to every generation just because of this. Mainly because the people of that age when the Quran was revealed, they had specific tools. They had specific tools of knowledge. They had specific instruments, right? Those instruments advanced. The more these instruments advance, the more our understanding of the Quran should also advance. Because they say al-ma'rifatu asiratu adawatiha. Knowledge is captive to its own tools. The sharper the tool that you have, the more precise knowledge that not just the more precise, but also the more knowledge that you will have. So these verses, when they were told to a people who were living in the 7th century Arabia, did they have access to science in the way we have today? No, they didn't. They got to the point of the verse, definitely. But because of the nature, because of the scientific framework they had, they didn't have the access that we have today, to the scientific methods that we have today. So it is a must upon the Muslims to really wake up to themselves and see the secrets of this book. And science is definitely a great window into this. And this verse is a great example. And we see just in short sentences how these can be taken as revolutions in terms of science, blah blah blah. And how much we wrong the Quran, we as Muslims, when we are not advanced enough, when we are not at the forefront of things. The Quran would be seen often as a superstitious book, as a book that is not compatible with. That's one of the questions we've been having, isn't it? Whether the Quran is compatible with modern science or not. The Quran is even ahead of it, if you wish. Right? But you need, the key question would be like, why, if this is such a transformational book, why has it not transformed Muslims? So we become more of a liability on the Quran when we don't really take these treasures seriously. That's how serious this is. And then we get stuck in this position, whether, I will come to this in a minute, what to do when a theory that comes from a different framework, a different scientific framework, that seems to be compatible with the Quran. What do we do in this case? Do we accept it as a Quranic thing? What do we say even? You have people who would say, actually you are reading too much into the Quran. You are just projecting a modern scientific theory onto the Quran. So you are basically subjecting the Quran to modern science. We are facing this dilemma primarily because we have been lagging behind for a long time. Apologies, yeah.
My question about Shafa'ah. Is my understanding of Shafa'ah goes only related to Sayyidina Muhammad. If you say that Shafa'ah, the angels are also Shafa'ah to angels.
Yeah, sure. Shafa'ah in the Islamic tradition is attributed to various people, to various categories, to the angels, to the prophets, to martyrs, to scholars, to prophets, definitely. So angels are one of those that are said to have the capacity to intercede. Yeah, and that's what they believe actually. ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى. They actually sometimes they gave names. They gave angelic names to the idols by way of saying we are worshipping these idols because they represent angels, and those angels that are being represented will intercede for us. ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى. So there was another common belief in Mecca as well. That's why it's important to know the context, because at face value, when you read this verse, you think it's talking about Christians. No, it's talking about the people of Mecca. This was a very common belief in this context. I mean, that actually in Surah Al-Najm is even more obvious, where it says, أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى وَمَنَاةَ الثَّالِثَةَ الْأُخْرَى. These are names of idols that they used to worship, and they claim these are the daughters they represent daughters of God, and that type of belief. Abdullah. Yeah.
The translation it's obviously based off modern science. We're using each traveling in model for the economy. But obviously back then, okay, we have the knowledge, they have the knowledge of like Earth and all this. So I was just wondering what the planet makes the whole thing directly and why it's that those words.
Okay. That's another thing. I mean, the word falak in Arabic refers to basically a space, an outer space, if you wish. If you translate it as, you know, the run in this orbit, that's a possible translation, definitely, and it's definitely influenced. That translation is influenced by our understanding of science today. Perhaps, I don't know, 100 years back, this wouldn't be the most standard translation. The translation would be perhaps, you know, something along the lines of the O run in the courses, or something along those lines. Again, that's why it is important to be in touch with the knowledge of your day. Yeah. And that's why translation also is very dangerous. Translation, in translation studies, there is this, two primary givens in translation. One, they say translation is an act of interpretation. Translation is an act of interpretation. And we don't normally, I mean, it seems simple, but we don't normally think about it. When someone comes to translate it as a text, a Quranic text, or a biblical text, whichever text, right? For you to translate, you need to understand first. When you come to understand, you know, you might have different ways of reading a text. By the end of the day, when you come to translate, you will need to pick one single possible or plausible translation. Why did you pick this one? It's because you believe in it. You believe this is the interpretation of this text. So translation is an act of interpretation. What follows this one, they say translation is an act of betrayal. What is it? Why is it an act of betrayal? Because you are claiming that this is what the actual author meant. And when you say this, you might be reading your own thinking. You might be reading your own context. You might be reflecting your own background. You know, I mean, that's why you really have to examine, is that really what the author had meant with this? Or am I really just projecting my own convictions? Of course, it is not that explicit, because there could be other multiple interpretations or translation of a text. But you choose one specific one. Why? Is it because of me, or because of the author's context, or whatever? That's why it is an act of betrayal. It can be an act of betrayal in that sense. Yeah. That's why when 100 years ago, there was a huge debate. Today it's an easy thing. Like when someone translates the Quran, everyone is happy. MashaAllah, we celebrate someone produced the Quran translation. 100 years ago, this was not even permissible. Like the dominant position among these Muslims was we should not translate the Quran because of these things. How could I claim that I know really out of all these interpretations why this one? I mean, I'm not endorsing that perspective. I'm glad we have all these translations. But I'm trying to just explain why this was the case. It's because of this. How could I make sure? Like, especially, you could say, okay, we already have the multiple tafsirs. Ibn Kathir, Al-Razi, Suyuti, all these scholars have written comprehensive tafsir. And they have different disagreements, right? You could equally have different translations. The difference is, with translations, none of these guys, neither Al-Razi, nor Suyuti, nor Ibn Kathir, nor Al-Tabari, none of them said this is what Allah said. They said this is my interpretation. With translation, no, nobody would say, this is these are the possible translations of the meanings. Nobody would say that. Here is a copy of the Quran, English. Right? So you are claiming this is what Allah says. That's a very dangerous thing. That's why they posed and asked, should we do that? And then Al-Azhar in 1925 issued a, I think it was, 1925, issued a fatwa that this is actually, the pros outweigh the cons and we should go ahead with it. And since then we literally started to have a sea of interpretations, translations. Are you done, Abdullah? Is that, was it? Yeah. Is it Abdul Wahab after that? It is. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Thank you, sir. Interesting. Indeed. Absolutely. Absolutely. The word khashya is a key word here. Khashya is different from khushu' though. Khushu' is more, that's the word. Khushu'. And khashya is this one. Khashya is deeper than khushu'. Khushu' is often to do with the physical body that is reflected in your internal being. So your external body, the physical reaction to the Quran. When you come to pray, why do we, pray like this? We do certain postures because these postures naturally should get you to be in a state of khashiyah. So khushu' is more of the outer posture that gets you to reach the internal feeling that is khashiyah. But that does confirm what you're saying, Abdul Wahab, as in angels are really at the peak of it. And khashiyah is not often translated as fear. They have that fear of God. And this word is, it is definitely a possible translation, but also we have to recognize it has a specific negative connotation today. What khashiyah at essence is about reverence. And that sense of awe you have for someone. This is different from having a fear of someone. When you are fearful of someone, it does not necessarily mean you love that person, you respect that person. But with khashiyah, yes. You are afraid of making them angry. You are afraid of making them unhappy or something. Because how much reverence you have for them. That's the khashiyah. While fear does not really carry this connotation. That we have to be really cautious with translating taqwa, khashiyah as fear. Because it captures only one dimension of it. So, yeah. And yes, angels are at the peak of it. And we as humans, Yes, we have moments when we become like that. You know, how Allah made us, Allah has created so many diverse things. But we often think of three primary categories. We have al-malak, al-insan, wal-hayawan. Al-malak are in a constant state of khushu', constant state of khashya of Allah, constant presence with Allah, if you wish. Al-hayawan, they don't have they don't enjoy what the angels enjoy in terms of the presence, the divine presence, these high feelings. Al-insan is literally in between. The insan, or the human being, has the capacity to really be in this state, the states of the angels, when they really work with themselves and they utilize the means that Allah had provided for them, but they also have the capacity to really go down, to become like animals. So we have angels, human beings, animals. Us in the middle, and we have the capacity to be in both areas. When we upgrade, we could be in the company like Abdul Wahab cited this hadith, لو بقيتم على ما كنتم عليه عندي لصافحتكم الملائكة. If you always remain in that state, you will be in the company of the angels. So we have moments when we become like that. I also have moments when we become like animals. When we give in to the desires that we have, the lowly desires that we have. And that's why the aql, or it's called the aql, is called the aql because of that. Aql in Arabic, it's translated as mind, right? Or reason. Aqala, in Arabic, aqala ya'qilu. Aqala is to bind something so that it doesn't become loose. So you are asked to use your aql, your mind, so that you don't become loose, which takes you to the lower level of the animals. And you are meant to use the purification of the revelation to really be promoted to the level of the angels. That's the function of aql, is to really get you to be on top of things, as opposed to just acting on your instincts like animals. You are asked to act with your mind, with your intellect. What do we show with the animals? We share the instinct, right? That is perception. We share that with them. We both perceive things, right? But what really distinguishes us is not the instinct, but the intellect. What does the intellect do? It conceives things. So what we share with the animals, we both perceive things. What distinguishes us is that we conceive things. What does conceive mean? To conceptualize something. You have a concept of something, right? So with the intellect that Allah has given us, you are meant to use this to become with these. Yes. That's a really good question. We have very limited knowledge of the world of the angels. Do they have aql? Yes, absolutely. Classically speaking, when at some point in Muslim history, whenever they thought of the angels, they thought of them as pure intellects, as in the fact that they don't really have bodies as such. Can you imagine? So, and the fact that the first people to ask Allah were angels. When they asked Allah, why would you place Adam as a successor when he will cause bloodshed, that Khalifa will cause bloodshed, blah blah blah. That's a form of reasoning. So the first people that reasoned were angels. As opposed, again, to the common conception that we have about angels, that they are just robots or machines, they just do. No, I mean, what's the value of this actually? If someone does things because Allah had created them in this way, but there is an element of voluntarism that comes from the angels' side. How are they composed? We have very little knowledge of that, because the Quran doesn't tell us much about that. Yeah. Sure. Possibly, yeah, yeah. Most important thing is to attribute to them a sense of voluntarism as opposed to just that sense of determinism. They do this because Allah determines this track for them. Yeah. Abdullah, yeah.
Did you say that in what time to have it? In the sense that Allah says, Allah is going to So if the angels don't have a conscience or an after, they will just be executed doing stuff for Allah in that sense. So why would Allah use that? Because He will and doing it.
I didn't get the point, my apologies.
If angels don't have a conscience, they will just being just doing stuff for Allah. Why would Allah
I mean, He doesn't do things out of need. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I mean, why did He create us? Does He need us? The same thing applies to the angels. But but without creating the angels, we wouldn't have come to know His diverse capacity, the diverse, His creative capacity to create different things and different categories with different capacities, if that makes sense. Yeah. So we wouldn't have understood really the subtleties of the world, the subtleties of His power, of His without creating diverse beings. One thing, like as we are speaking of the aql, the word aql in Arabic, we said aql is the Arabic word for to bind. Yeah. What's the English word for it? Mind, for the mind, right? In English, the word for it is mind. The word for it is also reason. Reason, also in French, it's, what is it? La raison. Right? And this, I don't know. What is it? I don't know Spanish. In German. I forgot. and this is really interesting for us to understand the different frameworks. La raison comes from, you know the word ratio? The ratio of something, right? Which is an element of calculation, an element of mathematics. This is what happens when you mention it in the English-speaking world, the word reason. How do you calculate things? How do you, in terms of maths? In Arabic, it's a different culture. The word aql, so today what do we translate? We translate reason as aql. Aql in Arabic is a different thing. As in, it is the capacity to bind things, to act with wisdom, to connect things. These are two different cultures. Translation is an act of betrayal. We automatically think of reason as aql. And that means we could end up with different values. As in, aql, for me, when you say someone is aql, someone is mindful, is reasoned, and acts with reasoning. If you say this to an Arabic speaking person, what comes to the mind is he acts politely, He walks gently. He's not rude to anyone. That's what aql means, right? In an English-speaking context, in a French-speaking context, what comes to your mind as you say reasoning? The ratio thing, the capacity to calculate things, blah blah blah. They are not necessarily contradictory, but they invoke different meanings. They invoke different connotations. Does this influence how we see the world? It definitely does. Does this influence the key foundational values that we have? It definitely does. To me, as I said, aql would mean that I really need to really go by what I say. And therefore I know that my mind is asking me to really, be grounded and blah, blah. It's more of an ethical thing. Right? While in an English-speaking context, in a French-speaking context, it's more of a mathematical thing. It's a way of thinking. While in Arabic, it's a way of doing, if you wish. Language makes a big difference, and that speaks to them. Again, these are the foundational values that build traditions. Today, we quickly translate aql as mind or as reasoning. Yes, it is definitely a possible translation, but we just need to understand the background behind these. There is within this context, there is a guy. Is it Kadami or? It's a theory basically. It's called the fusion of horizons. When you translate, what happens? You get two different cultures to really merge with each other. Not just one word. You get two different backgrounds. You think it's just mind, reasoning, aql. It's not that simple. These are two different cultures being put together. So that is very serious. Very serious. Absolutely. Absolutely. If I don't understand this, I could be mistranslating the Quran, I could be mistranslating what people are saying, and I think I'm doing a good job. So translation again is a really difficult job. When you come to translate, they always say you have to really be very knowledgeable, not only of the language you're translating from, but also of your own language at a deep level. Not only in terms of the language, but also in terms of the disciplines. If you're doing a translation in geography, you have to be an expert in geography. Today, what do we do when we come to translate a work of geography? You go to a good English teacher or something, and you think they will do a good job in translating a geography text. Does this make sense? No. Because you think it's just about the language. No, it's a huge culture behind it. Especially when it comes to translating a treatise like that, a geography, for example. You think, what do I need? I need someone who speaks English and Arabic. I have to translate from English into Arabic, okay? So I go to an English teacher or something, or translator. No, it's not that simple. You need someone who knows the two languages, who knows geography in both contexts, but also know the two cultures. So, and yet, translation is a really is often seen as an inferior thing, as in it's not given its due value. People don't think highly of translation. It's just they think of it just as a tool, like that. When in reality, if you can translate good translations, that speaks to how much knowledge. I mean, unfortunately, today people they go very easy about it. But in reality, if you really want to do proper translation, it's not easy. Was it Lisa? Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. That's a great observation, Ilayan. At the beginning, before Allah details the stories of the prophets that we're going to be seeing over the next few episodes, Allah is telling us, This has always been the message. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ مِنْ رَسُولٍ إِلَّا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنَا فَاعْبُدُونِ. Every single messenger was sent with this primary and foundational principle: worship none but Allah. And then by the end of those stories, the Quran says, إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. This is your community. It's one community with one message. That's it. The most essential thing. Thank you for that, mashallah. Ali. Hmm. 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 Absolutely, absolutely. Is that what you would say, Hafiz? What this verse? Hmm. Interesting. Hmm. Hmm. Alaikum salam. Hmm. 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 That's a beautiful observation. I mean, two beautiful observations, really. Thank you, Howard, for bringing this up. The idea of, okay, what do I make of this? Can I just come and pick a specific sentence in the Quran and run with it? This is, here you go, the Quran is talking about the Big Bang, or the Quran is talking about blah, blah, blah. This is literally what the idea of framework is about. What is a framework? If you think of a house has a specific framework. Within this framework, you have multiple rooms: dining room, living room, bedroom, blah, blah, blah. Every house has its structure, right? All houses would have living rooms. Are they always in the same position? No. Do they have the same structure? No. So, unfortunately, I think Imam Mohammed Abdu used to say something that's very sad as well. He says, أصبح القرآن مجالا مستباحا. Since the Quran has become like an open platform for anyone to just pick and choose. He said this within a specific context. The context was, if you look at the Ash'aris, the Atharis, the Maturidis, the Mu'tazilis, all these schools, what do they do? Like, think of any specific point of contention, the nature of God, whether should we understand God as, should we understand, how to understand the nature of God, the attributes of God, should we understand these literally or metaphorically, and they all have different arguments, and they all based just on the Quran. But what happens? Every school would often pick and choose a specific verse that seems to support the perspective. And then, find the way through which you can read the other passages or the other verses that seem to contradict you in a specific way that fits into your paradigm. So that you end up making the school the framework, and the Quran comes to really help. The Quran here is being used. Instead of being, the instituting piece, it's actually being used to fit in your background. Otherwise, we need to understand the Quranic framework to begin with. What is it? At essence, what is, and that's not an easy task, I admit. I admit that's not an easy task. But it has not been taken, it has not been dealt with, it has not been dealt with justly up to this very moment. If I ask you, what is the framework of the Quran? What is the scientific framework of the Quran? Just be stuck. But what I can do, and every Muslim would be happy to do that, here you have the Quran talking about the Big Bang, quickly, and you just pick a verse that seems to support this, and that's it, right? And this is when you miss the idea of the framework. When the Quran, when this was revealed, first of all, how do you ask, how did they understand this? One of the things about the companions, they were not fixated on the specifics. In the sense that Abdullah ibn Abbas was once asked, and he answered in a beautiful way. ما خير ما يفسر القرآن? What is the best thing that would interpret the Quran? He says, خير ما يفسر القرآن الزمان. The best thing that will interpret the Quran is time. That with the passage of time, people would, just the understanding of the Quran would be deepened with the passage of time because of the tools they go, glean as they go. We have an example where Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu posed as he was reciting Surat Abasa. And he came to this verse, وَفَاكِهَةً وَأَبَّا. And he thought, I don't know what the ab is. What is it? This word is not very common. I don't know what it is. Right? And after thinking for a bit, he said, shame on me. مَا هَكَذَا كُنَّا مَعَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. We were not like this when we were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We were after the message. What's the point? What is the framework? If you wish. This is just one single word in Surah Abasa that is too difficult to understand. That needs some, language expertise, if you wish. But the whole surah, you can't miss the point. The message is clear. Does not require expertise. But the details, of course, you need someone who. But then this is the context we're talking about. The companions had so many things to be busy with, and not all of them were scholars. Not all of them was Abdullah ibn Abbas. Right? That's why Abdullah ibn Abbas takes a very special place within the companions, really. But this is it. The companions would not really pose and busy themselves with the details, mainly because they were literally at the beginning of it. And they were establishing the basis of the community. That only makes sense. Right? And they understood that there will be a time when people have deeper knowledge, not necessarily deeper faith, deeper knowledge of the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ is famously said, رُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي, convey my message, even if you don't understand it fully. And then he said, رُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ إِلَى مَنْ هُوَ أَفْقَهُ مِنْهُ. Perhaps someone who lacks understanding will be transmitting something to someone who has more deeper understanding of his own understanding. Right? Of course, this hadith should not be used because it's commonly used today amongst Muslims. Whenever you know something, you want to implement it and you want people to implement it and you think, I'm doing something the Prophet asked me to do. This is not the context where the Prophet had said that. When it comes to really asking people to do things or telling people, should be doing this because I heard there is a hadith that says that. That's not what the hadith means. For you to become in a position of telling people what they should and they shouldn't do Islamically, you have to have really good knowledge of the Islamic tradition, good holistic knowledge of the tradition, not just bits and pieces. Right? So the framework is very important. We are, by way of our love, driven by our love for the Quran, you want to prove to everyone that it is compatible with science. But in doing so, remember you might also be doing the Quran a disservice. Because science by definition is quite tentative. Right? It does change. And when it changes, you put the Quran in a very embarrassing situation. So what do we do in this case? So first of all, we have to understand the context here. When these verses were revealed, one of the one of the common ways of viewing the world was Greek mythology. Greek mythology was actually reached the Arab Peninsula somehow. Mythologies, by definition, they just travel very fast. The way they understood the world, I'm sure you've come across so they had in Greek mythology they are known for having multiple deities. So the belief was that this world was created from void, basically, and from this void of chaos, basically, and from this chaos came a, um, 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 a deity called Gaia, and this goddess, sorry, gave birth to what we now know as Uranus. Uranus, by the way, is the Greek word for sky today. So Gaia is the mother of Uranus. Even though she is the mother of Uranus, they got married and they gave birth to Cronus. And then they were battling. Because of this battle, Cronus came to actually separate the two, with Uranus becoming the sky and Gaia becoming the earth. That was a very common understanding in Greek mythology. And it actually constituted, like it traveled through cultures, that this is how things began. Is that what the Quran is saying? Of course not. But this is the background of it. This is. Of course, the people of knowledge would know that this is a common thing, at least in various cultures. I mean, not just the Greek culture actually. I mean, it's an Indian culture, but with different details. Is the Quran saying that? Definitely not. The Quran is saying they were ratqan, the heavens and the earth, they were joined together, if you wish. And then, فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا, we separated them. As we said, the companions did not engage much with this until 1,000 years later, people came up with the Big Bang theory. I mean, as far as I know, it's if I'm not mistaken, it's the most dominant theory, isn't it? In terms of how we understand how the world came in a specific point in time. I don't know how many years. 13? Here you go. 13.8 billion years. The whole world was just one mass, one piece, and then it exploded. The mistake that we often do is we say this is what the Quran is saying. This confirms what the Quran is saying, or the Quran is confirming what modern science is saying. This is literally the wrong way of conceptualizing this. I'd add two qualifications. I want to benefit from modern science, definitely. It does. I mean, we should not be dogmatic. Literally, we are walking on eggshell, in the sense that sometimes you don't want to be dogmatic. You want to benefit from modern science, especially if it's like solid stuff. Why would I reject that? Right? But at the very same time, you don't want to be reading too much into the Quran, and unknowingly you are projecting things onto the Quranic mindset. Right? How do I do that? How do I avoid being too dogmatic to accept something that the Quran might be saying that, might be saying that. It might not also be saying that. So the first thing to notice here is that language matters. How do we express ourselves when we notice things like this? And instead of saying the Quran confirms or this confirms or blah blah blah, Just you could say this is Oh, exactly. That's another. That's absolutely, absolutely. You could say a more neutral word that opens up the field. You could say the Quran parallel, maybe. Not, I mean, even the word parallel is still a strong word. Perhaps a potential parallel. And then what happens? Just open the conversation. You will actually encourage Muslims to do proper science. But when they do proper science, they will have the Quranic framework. As opposed to someone who is coming from a non-Quranic framework, what happens? I'm just picking bits and pieces, the pieces that would fit me, but without understanding the framework. So it could be just that sort of, we call it patchwork. I'm just, amalgamating things that might not necessarily be of the same consistent system. So when you use, I mean, that's just an example. Like you could develop a more neutral language that makes you open to modern things, modern solid things, but without wronging the Quran, without, I mean, no Muslim should be dogmatic when it comes to the Quran anyway. As in, no one should claim this is definitely what Allah wants. I mean, be it with verses that are to do with science or whatever. We have to humble ourselves. As in, speak with a language of tentativeness. God might be saying this, God might be saying that. Just humble yourselves before Allah. So we never know. So use use terms of potentially, and it's not don't confirm, don't disconfirm. Just that way you don't really put the Quran in an embarrassing situation. Nor are you being dogmatic against modern science. Use it to encourage Muslims who have the framework that would help them read things in context. Um, and I mean, within the same verse, we have another. I mean, my apologies, we've run out of time. We have another sentence that is as significant. That is exactly وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. And I mean, the same thing in the Greek tradition, which was the most well-established scholarly tradition in pre-Islamic times, right? If you study Greek philosophy, there's always this divide between uh, Socratic philosophy and pre-Socratic philosophy. With Socratic philosophy, I mean, natural philosophers in the Greek tradition, they were always busy with the question. Apologies, in Greek philosophy, there is, even till today, people discuss and know the Greeks to be believers in this, what we know today as the four-element theory. Right? What are the four elements? A fire, water, earth, and air. These are the four elements. They only arrived at this quite late, almost like 500 to 600 years before. This is the Aristotelian perspective on nature, the four-element theory. 500 or 600 years before that, they were discussing the question of what they call in Greek arche. And arche means the origin of something. What is they were trying to come up with a solution, with an answer to the question of what is the origin of the world. They had different answers. Some of them said it's fire. Others said, I mean, they were busy with this question. What is, they all believed that there must be one thing, one original thing from which everything else had come. They came up with different answers. The first one, Thales, was the one to have believed that it's water. Water is the origin of things. Of things, not of living things. To use his language, matter. All matter comes from water. Matter as in rocks, mountains, blah blah blah. Not us as humans. So The original thing, he could he talks about like water coming in different forms, solid, liquid, gaseous. It comes in different shapes, and he tries to make sense of this. He prompted others to come up with different proposals. Is it fire? Is it this? Is it that? That they ended up with 500 years later. They ended up with believing that it actually could be a composite of different things. And the most dominant theory became these four elements. And now, how many elements do we have? Do we think of? Think of the periodic table? Huh? 118. 14? I don't know. Last time I checked it was 14. Like when I studied it was 14. Yeah, at some point. I might be mistaken, but I studied this when I was 20 years. So biology must have, physics must have changed. So you see, that just shows how primitive the understanding was. Is this what the Quran is saying? The Quran is saying something that's very distinct. It is not saying all matter comes from water. It actually says every living thing. That's very specific. It is not saying everything. No, this guy was saying it's matter. It's the material things, not us. The Quran says even humans, they come from water. You may apply this across the board, like semen and literally everything, right? And yet the Quran puts this in context. The Quran does not put this, when modern science arrives at this sort of composite, the periodic table, the elements, the different elements that we have, all of these are based on, observation, are observing this in the universe. Yes, the Quran is asking us to observe this, but observe it as a divine creation. That's the framework, right? So the second point, after I talked about the language that we use, also observe the paradigm. As in, don't just be too quick and run with every single thing that you think this confirms the Quran, this proves the Quran, blah blah blah. Don't forget the paradigm. Don't forget the paradigm. It is what makes or breaks. It's not the details, it's the framework. And I think this verse is just a good indicative of this. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. Wallahu alam. It's too much time today. Shall we meet up next week? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد. And thank you so much for the great contributions.